So now we are going to explain a generic solution, like I have a source system and what are all the steps I will be doing before I actually provision a test data to a application. So let's start with a source database. Now we have multiple databases available, and my requirement is how I am going to provision this data by ensuring the sensitive information is masked, and whatever data coverage is maintained by creating synthetic data, and then finally data is provisioned using a copy data virtualization tool. So before we do anything related to data masking or anything, the first step is defining the access control on the source database. Generally, that will be defined at the organization level, but it should be also defined at the TDM level to ensure what access control should be defined for each source system and for each user. Now that is defined, and on top of that, the first step is data discovery. So here when we say data discovery, it's basically doing two things. One is data profiling, and then the second is sensitive data discovery. So why we do data profiling is, in lot of systems, especially if your source is a legacy system, you may not have the data relationships defined in the database level itself. Even if the data is stored in RDBMS, generally if you are using some applications, the data constraints are defined at the application level. So when we go through our database, the data relationship may not be available in the data itself. So which requires data profiling, and through that we can identify how data is used, how the relationships are identified, and then we can review that with the SMEs to define the relationship between the data. And even especially this will be very critical if you are actually sourcing data from multiple databases, because you will never get relation between multiple databases. So in this phase we do that part, identifying data relationship. And the second part is sensitive data discovery. So how sensitive data discovery is done is, we define the patterns. The pattern can be based on the column name, or it can be based on the actual data itself. So for example, if I am searching for a credit card number, my data pattern would be like, I will be searching few things like column name like credit card or credit underscore card or something. And also I will check by data, and I will see whether the data is 16 digit or not, or if they have stored with hyphen, then whether it is four numbers, hyphen four numbers. So I can define a format required for the data to be searched, and then we can run the tool on the production data or DR to see which are all the columns are sensitive data. So those are all the two things that we do in data discovery. And then with that information, we do the data classification. So in that place, we define what are all the sensitive data, and even you can define business level grouping, like these tables are belonging to credit card, these data are belonging to loan LOS, something like that. We can do the classification, which we will be mainly using in the subsequent task. So now we know what are all sensitive columns. So the next step is masking. So here again the tools can be used. So the tools can deploy different types of masking technique, like lookup or scrambling. Even you can define our own user defined masking techniques to mask the data in the way we require. So now it's time to create the gold copy and store the data, because I had taken the data from source systems, now masked. So this data is now ready to provision to test environment, because I have removed all the sensitiveness of the data. Okay, but as we talked about, we do not we do not know whether sufficient data coverage is there with the data copied from production. So in this place, we also bring in the synthetic data generation. The tools available in the market can be used to configure the business rules and how the data should look like, and we can generate the data required. So the general idea is whatever the data masked from production as well as the data generated should be stored in gold copy, because that is going to be the source now when you consider from the data provisioning perspective. This will be the one superset of data and which can be used for subsetting and everything. Okay, now we have defined the data masking and synthetic data generation. The next main important thing is data management, because you need to have that information stored in somewhere so that this can be repeated. Otherwise, everything you are doing is going to be a one time. So whenever you do the data discovery or data classification, it should be stored in the metadata, and all your masking rules should be stored in some repository. Similarly, your provisioning rules, subsetting rules, and synthetic rules. Okay, now we have the data management available, and we also masked data with the synthetic data generated. Now it's time to do the data provisioning. So during provisioning only, we will also ensure the data is subsetted before it is actually provisioned to the test environment. So during provisioning, we may do two types of provisioning. One is what we discussed, the copy data virtualization method. So in that case, you are not actually going to create n number of physical copies. You are just going to point your CDV tool on a gold copy, and it can actually create whatever number of virtual databases required for you. It can create, and your applications can point to that. Or in some cases, you may need a physical copy itself. It is based on your requirement. For example, generally organizations prefer a physical copy for a performance testing. So in that case, we don't need to use the CDV, or even we can use the CDV to create a physical copy, because the tools available in the market has both options. You can either create a virtual copy, or you can actually clone your source and create a physical copy. So this is a generic TDM solution, and this is not specific to any tool, because there are n number of tools available in the market, and each has its own plus or minus, and so that's the reason we haven't used any tools here. We just wanted to give a brief intro of how TDM works and how we can use CDV when a TDM solution is implemented.